guest lecture session by Devangshu. Devangshu sir is basically a founder of Third Eye, which is a specialty management consulting firm, and he's managing partner of the PVC Partners, and an early stage investment and advisory firm. That's an early stage investment and advisory firm. Also, he is a volunteer for the Satsang Foundation across various initiatives, and he has been working with the C20. So today, sir will be taking class on sacred ecology, right, sir?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I just wanted to know how long we have for this session so that I can time myself accordingly.
We have 1 hour, sir. We have 1 hour. Yeah, if you have time, maybe then you can address some questions also for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would love to do that. In fact, I had planned it more as an interactive mode, but there is some kind of base material that we need to go through. So I thought I would go through that and then kind of get into a more conversational mode, if that's okay.
Sure, sir. You can make it as you want, sir. Actually, the platform is yours for 1 hour. You can prefer your own mode of working. No problem at all, sir.
Great. So if you can see my screen, I'll see if I can change the modality here. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yes, I'm able to see the screen.
Oh, okay. All right.
And before we start, can I ask Mandira to record the session? I hope Mandira is there online.
Recording.
Yeah, all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with everyone. I would like to say two things before I start, the session. One is that I'm no scholar. I have a curious mind. I do read a lot, but having said that, the subject that we're talking about is so vast that even scholars would fail to kind of encompass the entire realm of sacred ecology itself, and sacredness and rivers. So there are those three things which are intertwined, and I'll talk about them a little bit. The second aspect that I wanted to mention was that since we are talking about rivers, there are many elements of that which go far beyond theorizing or just concepts, and that's something which therefore when I was kind of structuring the session, I thought I'll do a 10-15 minute talk and then we can have a conversation. But then it occurred to me that it would be actually doing disservice if we didn't touch upon two specific aspects, and I'll come into that in the second part of my conversation. And then we can, once that is over, we can go into having a Q&A or exchanging views as you would want to. So let me start with the three themes in that whole, the title as it came. We're talking about ecology, we're talking about sacredness, and we're talking about rivers. I will not go through these one by one. These are intertwined in many ways, and during this session, I will make reference to each of these probably along the way and their relationship. But before we delve into those three themes, I think we need to talk about water. Water is in most mythology and concepts from the ancient world, whether it's from India or Indian civilization or others. There are five main elements or base fundamental principles that people talk about, and water is among them. You have fire, you have air, you have earth, you have space and water. But at the same time, water seems to be, in some cases, the most important. This is a hymn of creation from the Rig Veda, the one of the principal Veds of the Indian texts, and this is this deals with the origin of the universe and so on. And while when you read the verses, it kind of says who knows what was there earlier. Uh, One very important thing it highlights that even before there was air, before there was breath, before there was anything, there was darkness wrapped in darkness, and all this was only unillumined cosmic water. So the mention of water is actually found in a lot of the ancient texts, and is integral to the whole system of thinking that we have. It's obviously something which is material to us, and that's why when you think about water, uh, you can't help but thinking of the material impact it has on us, and that's something which is very important to remember as we go along. The human body is made up 60% or more, 65% of it is comprised of water. Without water, actually, a lot of life wouldn't exist as we know it. I mean, there may be other forms of life, but at least on this planet, water is the substance which makes life possible. So it's absolutely integral to our life and livelihood. So within the traditions and myths and practices, there are two aspects. One is the worship of water, and within that there are two aspects. I mean, water is uh, at the same time life-giving. It allows sustenance of life. But on the other hand, you also have the flooding myths, which kind of wipe out all life except for a little bit, which then regenerates and grows again. And the creation and the origin, as well as the flooding, these myths also exist in India. They exist in West Asia and various other places. So it's not something which is unique. I mean, there is something in our collective memory, or our collective mythology as human beings, that water plays a very important role in both giving birth and in then destroying and renewing, if you like. The second aspect of it is worship with water. So when you're looking at such a fundamental element, uh, one is, of course, it is important. Uh, it gives us life, and it's extremely uh, life-threatening as well if it gets into a flooding mode, or that kind of thing. But at the same time, water also becomes part of the worship. And in that, there are two elements that I see. One is water as a barrier. So you take, let's say, the representation of a river, which separates the living world from the world of the death, or beyond. That's a separation. It's a barrier between the two. Uh, there is a separation, let's say, which may be represented when water is kept in a pot at the entrance, or around. You sprinkle water around where you're praying, maybe, or something like that. And it's like, while you're purifying, you're also kind of creating a barrier uh, energetically, if you like, to outside influences. At the same time, water is also a channel or a bridge. So the same river, which is a barrier, or kind of a border between the living and the dead, also is the channel to carry the dead from here to the next world, or to the next life. And this again occurs both in Indian mythology as the river Vaiterni, or if you take the Styx in European mythology, or even just if you look at practices uh, in terms of uh, how people, when they die, the body is dealt with. It's washed, it's purified. So it's like water becomes a channel. Small children are often cast into a flowing river so that they can be carried on further. And these are things again which there is the principle of both a separation between this world and the next. So there's a barrier. There's a principle of separating what is uh, healthy, what is good, from what is not, and therefore the purification. But at the same time, it's also a channel to transfer the energy, transfer the life force, transfer the life form from one realm to the other, if you like. The third aspect that we were going to talk about is ecology, or it should be the first actually, because it's going to underlie the entire conversation. Ecology itself is a word which emerges from Greek roots. Oikos means house or a dwelling place, and ecology is the study of organisms and their dwelling places. It's very interesting in this because it is not just the fact that you're studying the space in which uh, life exists or living forms exist. The space itself is living in a sense because of the interaction between the different elements. So if you take uh, a river or if you take a pond, there is life in it, there's life around it. There is a constant interaction going on between the life forms, and also the interaction is going on between the water element and the other elements which are surrounding it and which are in it. So there is it's the whole question of uh, the life giving aspect and water being alive is something which I'd like to talk about. So there is the first one, which is that water gives life. It is the elixir of life. Second is water is life, which is, repeated again and again in our culture, in our religions. It's a symbol of fertility, of life, of wealth. If you have water, you can, carry out farming. You have enough to drink. You can have uh, animal husbandry, and therefore it's all related to well-being in all its sense, both from the point of view of giving life as well as uh, being the kind of foundational principle or element of life. But the third element, which I talked about, is that water has life itself, or water is alive. I think that's something which, uh, unfortunately, uh, much of the world today has disconnected with that idea, where we have got into a sense of water being a commodity. It's a commodity like uh, a metal ore may be a commodity, or sand from a river might be a commodity for building or anything like that. And water has always been, I mean, if we look at our education system over the past several decades, uh, when we study geography, etc., we talk about renewable resources and non-renewable resources, and water is placed in that category of renewable resource. So you're thinking about resource, which of course has to be managed, but it is also to be exploited and applied. And that's the economic thinking. And on top of that, you apply the word renewable to it, which gives you a feeling or an illusion, I would say, that there is immense and unending resource available to be exploited. Our own societies have become uh, divorced from the reality of water. Our cities get water piped from hundreds of kilometers away from rivers which are dammed up because our cities are growing and the demand for water is going up constantly. As our lifestyles change, they become more modern. Actually, the per capita water consumption keeps climbing up, and that kind of puts more pressure. So you're sucking water from the underground aquifers and you're pulling water from the rivers far away. And at the same time, when it comes into our house or our office buildings or our factories, it's delivered in a pipe. You turn on a tap and you get the water. There is no connection with the source of the water. And therefore, we don't see it as alive. The whole uh, uh, economic concept of water has kind of distorted our relationship with what water is. So I think the fact that water is a very dynamic element, a very fundamental element of shaping our landscape, our environment, our climate, is something which we're completely oblivious to. Uh, this is our guru, Sri M, and this was something which he said while we were working on the C20 working group on revival of rivers and water management. The fact that every civilization from ancient times is defined by its river, and a river is like a bloodstream of a human being. It is that which keeps everything going. It's the life essence of the whole country. And this is true over the ages, over the last several thousands of years, we've seen civilizations rise and fall with the availability of water and the scarcity of water. This is something which we need a constant reminder on in our current world today, our economic structure, our social political structure as it is today, the climate as it is today. This is something which we need to remind ourselves of constantly. I just kind of, I just picked up one random verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the texts which is revered and used by Indians and in Indian society. But you could dip into any number of texts from around the world where water is mentioned, rivers are mentioned. In this specific case, this is Krishna when he's describing when Arjun has asked him, to reveal himself and Krishna is describing himself. He's kind of giving Arjun descriptors in different forms, and he says of water creatures, I'm the crocodile, and that's very important because I don't know if you noticed the first image on screen that I put out was actually of a goddess with the crocodile underneath her feet as the vehicle. The crocodile and that was a statue of the Ganga, of the river Ganges, with the crocodile as the vehicle. The crocodile is actually one of the peak predators in our ecosystem. And if you understand ecology, you'll understand how important peak predators are. Peak predators actually keep the population of the prey under control, and they maintain a certain balance. And if you have peak predators in an ecosystem, it is a healthy ecosystem. One of the very popular forwards, which has been going around for the last several years, is about wolves being introduced to Yellowstone Park in the US, for instance. And the ecosystem there thriving suddenly because the wolves have brought down the number of their natural prey who would actually feed or overfeed on the vegetation. And therefore, if the vegetation was overfed, you have the ground actually getting denuded and every resource then dropping and it becoming more of a desert than really a vibrant ecosystem. And that's something which, again, in India's case, you have tigers, lions. In the case of Europe, you have potentially wolves and various other big cats. In the case of rivers, and in India, I think the crocodile uh, represents that peak predator, which balances the ecosystem, which keeps the ecosystem balanced. It kind of indicates that the ecosystem is healthy. The crocodile also sometimes stands for the lack of knowledge, the lack of wisdom. And it's Ganga who's kind of, carrying divine wisdom down to humanity. And she's kind of overcoming the crocodile. So it's symbolic in that sense as well. The Ganga is actually one of the rivers along whose banks a Kumbh Mela is held. This is in Prayagraj. This is a photograph which really doesn't do justice to the size of the event. It has already been documented as the gathering of human beings anywhere. The next Kumbh Mela in Prayagraj in Uttar Pradesh in India in 2025 is expected to draw 400 million pilgrims. That's a larger population within that period of a few weeks, several weeks. It carries on 1 to 3 months typically, during which that place will see a gathering of a larger population than every other country in the world except for China and India within a short span of time. It's an incredible, incredible gathering. And I'll talk a little bit about the nature of these gatherings and what could come out of them if we actually kind of reconnect with the spirit of the gathering. So you have, 4 places in India where the Kumbh Mela happens. Haridwar is where the Ganga is. Prayagraj is where 3 rivers, 2 physical and 1 which is said to have disappeared, meet. In Nashik, you have the Godavari, which is also called the Dakshin Ganga, and I will come back. It's a very important point here, but I'll come back to it a little later in the session. and Ujjain, which has the Shipra River. You have a cycle where Purn Kumbh Mela is held every 4 years at each site. You have Ardh Kumbh Melas, which is kind of a smaller gathering, which may be held between Purn Kumbh Melas in Haridwar and Prayagraj, and the Mahakumbh, which happens 12 times 12, once every 144 years. You also have in India the Pushkar or Pushkaram, where this happens in alongside 12 rivers, not just the four that were mentioned earlier, but these are other rivers as well. The Ganga and the Godavari are included here, of course, but there are 10 other rivers where this happens. And it's again, it's a gathering, it's a large gathering along the banks of the river. People kind of, it becomes it's an occasion for people to take a dip in the river and relieve themselves of their sins or, of their burdens, in a sense, the worldly burdens. But there is a lot of other social and economic activity which goes on. In the past, these used to be also places where governance was guided, in a sense, where the ruler, the society, the merchants, the people who are involved with water, the river, its resources, its ecosystem, all came together, and there was a give and take which would happen. Religious leaders. So all of these, while they on the surface look like the religious and cultural festivals alone, there's a whole kind of, it's like the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole lot of other stuff which is going on, which has potentially, if done right, the contribution to keeping the river and the overall ecosystem much healthier than we have today. This is a photograph from about 8 years ago, almost to the day, a couple of weeks more, where during the Walk of Hope, which took place from Kanyakumari, where the three oceans meet, to Kashmir, 7,500 kilometers, there was a walk which was undertaken by Sri M and many other volunteers. This was along the banks of the Narmada, one of the most important rivers again in India, where a prayer was being offered to the river. This was at dawn. We have some pictures here of different kind of interactions with the river, people praying in the river, worshipping in the river, people worshipping with the water of a river, people offering their prayers through the water to the sun and to the river, which goes back to what I said earlier about water being a channel or a energy conveyor, in a sense. And the river also becoming a recipient at the end of the cycle of worship. So you have festivals like Ganesh Chaturthi, which goes on. You have Ganesh Puja, which happens. And at the end of it, the Ganesh idol is immersed in the river. And similarly, you have Durga Puja, and this is one of the images from there, where the idol of Durga is actually immersed in the river, which is like she's going back to her house. Now, all of these, of course, again, stem from hundreds, if not thousands of years of practice. But there are elements which have changed as we have modernized the society and as we have modernized the material that we use and so on. So we have, unfortunately, pictures like this which are there, this is the Yamuna River. There's a puja called the Chhat Puja, which happens around this time this week. In fact, it happened across Bihar, UP, Delhi, etc., North India, wherever I would say the Eastern UP and Bihari community is. Chhat Puja has become quite big. So it happens across the country now because everybody's kind of migrated for different jobs, etc. But this is a picture from the river Yamuna, which is one of the sacred rivers in the country. It is also, like most other rivers in India, one of the most abused water bodies, because sewage goes into it, domestic sewage goes into it, industrial effluents go into it. And at the end of it, really, the river can do only so much to carry things away and to kind of handle what we throw at it. And yet, for individuals who are connected to the faith, uh, the river still remains sacred, no matter what happens, no matter how polluted it is. They get down into it and do their prayers and do their offerings in it, all of that. Having said that, I think there is a recognition from many parts of society, government, etc., who also see this as being unsafe, right? So the kind of workaround for that is to dig ditches uh, where it's a temporary ditch. They fill it with water. That becomes the river, stand-in for the river, substitute, where prayers can be offered, and then it gets emptied out and filled in again. But that's not really a solution. The solution would be for us to fix what's going on, what's going wrong with the river. And I'll come to that in just a few moments. This is another river, one of the major rivers again in India, Krishna. Again, festivals, river festivals, which used to happen along the banks of the Krishna, have moved away because of the pollution of the river, because of safety concerns, health concerns, and so on. Which is, again, we are getting, while we maintain the veneer of the festival, the social customs, the religious customs, you're actually disconnected from the root of it, which was to celebrate the river. And the river becomes just a drain to carry the effluents and the dirt of human society away. This is another unfortunate picture, actually. There is a river here. It's an invisible river, really, because the river has been so overused. They had to dig a bore well to draw water from the river Kaveri. And the people who would otherwise take a dip in the river, immerse themselves fully, are having to do with a shower from the borewell. And this is what we've got to. So, how do we solve it? And I think this is the point where I'd like to actually talk about Anupam Mishra a little bit. He passed away a few years ago. Uh, he did a lot of research on water and particularly was struck by how water was managed in the driest state in India, Rajasthan, and how people, society actually came together and they had rules and regulations as to how to manage water in a place where there was very, very little rainfall. Life existed through better management. The book that he's holding actually in his hands in this picture is a book that he wrote in Hindi called Aaj Bhi Khare Hain Talab. In English, the translation is The Ponds Are Still Relevant. And the fundamental statement is that we forget that the water cycle and life cycle are one. If we break the water cycle, and the water cycle actually includes not just the water that we can see, the fresh water or the salt water that we can see, is the invisible water in the air. It's all the elements that make it possible for the water to circulate through the entire ecosystem. And this is where ecology comes into play, where the soil is required, the rocks are required, living things are required, plants and animals, who help to keep the water clean. The water goes into the atmosphere as vapor, falls onto the ground, and brings seeds to life and makes life possible. So this is, if this water cycle is broken, the life cycle will definitely be broken. And that will have an impact on society, on ecologies, on economies, on nations. And this is something which is very, very important to remember, I think. And that's why the ecology part is very, very important. So how do we go about reviving the sacred ecology that we have profaned? And this is where I'd like to just dip into the two areas that I wanted to talk about, which is policy and practice. These are two separate examples I'll talk about. The policy part is coming from the work that we've done for the C20 working group, and the practice is one of the projects that's ongoing at the moment. So I'll just share very, very quickly some of the policy recommendations from the C20 working group. The themes in the working group were river rejuvenation, water management and conservation, and disaster management, floods and droughts, to mitigate both, because both are not good for us. The first policy recommendation that came out from a working group was to commit to an ecology-centric approach. In this, there are two very, very, very important elements. The first is to maintain the continuous and free flow of rivers and their self-purification capacity. Remember what I mentioned about the purification of water. If rivers are dammed up, if rivers are overused, if life in the river and life around the river is disturbed, the water cycle gets disturbed. So while we are building dams, if we dam up the entire river, we are creating silt banks behind the dam. We are reducing the flow of the water, which is terribly, terribly harmful to the creatures downstream, the fish and other living beings, which may be dependent on that amount of water flowing down, which is no longer available, both from the point of view of living and breeding, because some of the species of fish actually have to swim upstream to breed. And when you dam up a river, you're actually preventing them from getting to their breeding ground. So that's one aspect to, while energy is important, while irrigation is important, we need to find ways to do this without actually stopping the river in its tracks. The whole flow of the river itself is self-purifying. So if we let the river flow and if we let the tributaries flow into the river purifies itself, because you have plants and vegetation throughout the course of the river, within the river as well as outside, which actually helps to filter out a lot of the effluents that we throw into the river. The second is, again, we forget about this because we live in cities and we like to have nicely built straight lines. So the very definition of the river is that it is a natural flow of water with its own structure. It's different from a canal, which is man-made. A man-made canal is a bound structure where water is flowing in a certain channel which is defined. The very name canal is channel, right? We love to build riverfront experiences. We love to divert the river into a canal-like system, but that's taking its very nature away. We are making it unnatural, and that's something which we are already seeing the issue uh, or the issues that creates. Scarcity of water, because you actually take it away from the natural path. Flooding, where buildings come up on places where the river used to flow, and suddenly if there's a onrush of water, there's more rain, there's a glacial outburst or whatever, the river will find its own level and its own way back to its path where it was. So that creates more damage than it's worth. The second recommendation was for states, countries, governments to be stewards of water commons. So there are two things here. One is the water commons. Commons are owned by everybody and nobody. We believe in private property. We believe in, ponds and lakes and all of that being privatized. We believe in bottling water and I'll come to that. But water is part of a commons, which belongs to everyone and no one. And the governments should be a steward of the water commons. That's something which is, I'm not going to go into the sub points, but this is something as a principle which the working group recommended the G20 leaders should take. The third aspect is having solutions which are ground up and consensus led. We tend to have very top down approach as far as solutions are concerned. We take a problem, we take a pinpointed problem, we solve it, or we apply some balm to it. It's like applying a band-aid to a fracture. The ecosystem is really, really damaged. But there are solutions available within indigenous wisdom, within native cultures and traditional technologies. And that's something which we are yet to tap into fully. There are a good number of success stories which are coming out now from India and other places where you can read up where rivers have been revived using purely indigenous traditional technologies and techniques. Anupam Mishra was a great kind of inspiration for a lot of that work which has happened. So that's another aspect to keep in mind. The fourth one is to use technology. I mean, we are living in a world which is filled with technology. Why can't we make data our friend and actually enable the practitioners who are in this area to identify, to demarcate, and to manage and monitor the water bodies as they should be? There is a lot of expertise and a lot of interest and a lot of passion which is available. We need to use the technology extensively and innovatively, openly. The fifth one is something which is important from a global security perspective, that if water wars have been hypothesized now for a few years, and they already happen. There are water treaties, but the moment there is going to be scarcity, there will be conflict. And that's something which will require us to work together across borders. And it requires a lot of cooperation, a lot of collaboration at the highest levels and at the people level. And finally, including environmental factors, sustainability in valuing water resources. We are treating water as a commodity which can be bottled up and sold. We are treating it as a commodity for companies which can dig deep into the ground and pull out water from aquifers which have been formed over millions of years, empty it out, and make 10 times the amount of money as what it costs them to pull out the water from the ground from commons, which gets privatized and sold. And that's something which has to uh, be looked at. And then the same water bottles actually flow back into the water bodies as discard, as pollution. So there has to be a more holistic way to manage it. Within this, I would like to talk, and this is kind of the closing part of my talk, the Aviral Godavari initiative, which is Godavari is the second longest river in India. It's also called the Dakshin Ganga, which is southern Ganga, the southern Ganges. And like all other rivers, it has been significantly impacted by human activity. Deforestation has created issues in terms of both soil being maintained and along the route and at the origin. Therefore, the water which should have seeped into the ground does not seep into the ground. The tributaries don't form. And what was once a mighty river flowing throughout the year, today is a seasonal river. Plus, we've talked about the pollution. This is how the Godavari actually looked in 2012. You can see the impact of human activity in all of these pictures. So there's work which has happened over the last 10, 11 years around the Godavari with a lot of volunteers, a lot of NGOs, a lot of government officials, a lot of corporates getting together because everybody's kind of concerned about uh, the uh, the visible destruction of what is heritage for the tradition, for the society. So a lot of work happened along the way, and that has had some impact. People have got involved. Tens of thousands of people have got involved in this whole journey in planting trees and cleaning up, in reviving water bodies. And fortunately, there was an impact. There's a visible impact. Okay. If you see pictures on the left of the screen, 2013 versus 2018, there is a very clear visible impact in terms of the river itself, how it was in 2012, 2019, for instance. But the work isn't finished. The work remains because as the society grows, as cities grow, uh, our waste problem, our management problem doesn't go away, it just multiplies. So the work is continuing. What is happening now? These are all pictures from between November last year to November this year, in terms of cleaning up, in terms of tree plantation, in terms of creating barriers to slow down the water flow on the hill where the Godavari River originates, engagement with the government, engagement with uh, school students, college students, religious leaders. So it's multimodal, multi-channel activity. The main action points, if I can just highlight them, are these. So the first one is to restore existing water bodies and create new ones, to clean the existing water bodies in the surroundings and restore them so that they can hold water and recharge the water into the ground. The second is to use trenches and loose boulder dams to actually stem the water flow. So this is, if you look at the Brahmagiri mountain, where the Godavari originates, it's catching rainwater or the moisture from the air, trees are catching that and pushing it into the soil, and that water finds its way and creates little streams and rivulets, which then join and make the river. Unless the water seeps into the ground, this does not happen. So the trenches and the loose boulder dams are actually to slow down the flow of water when it falls during the monsoon, because it comes down with great force. So the idea is to slow that flow down and let the water seep. Third is to plant and protect the grass which is there, to again, protect the topsoil, to plant trees, both from the point of view of, again, slowing the force of the rainfall, and also to attract rainfall and attract moisture which can go into the ground. Fourth is rainwater harvesting, and there is again a lot of work around being done on that, encouraging communities, individuals, families, institutions to actually build rainwater harvesting structures, both for using the rainwater which is stored, as well as to recharge the groundwater, which can then kind of find its way to the river. And finally, very, very importantly, the community ownership of all this work which is done through both creating sustainable livelihoods and employing mythology and religion to drive the conservation of water and to maintain and preserve the very kind of ecosystem which we're talking about. So this is really sacred ecology in practice. If you can do this right, and this is not something which is a short-term project, it's going to take years. It's already taken years, more than 10 years. And I suspect it will take another 10 years more. But at least the first phase is to make, rejuvenate the river Godavari and to make the flow perennial from the origin, Trimbakeshwar. And the slogan there says Brahmagiri ki Haryali or Godavari ki Pavitrata, which means to green the Brahmagiri mountain and to make to make the Godavari pure. Those go hand in hand. So I'd just like to play a very short film, which hopefully will give a good amount of context. I hope you can all hear the sound as well.
सूरज की तपती किरणों से भाप बनकर मैं छिड़े, बादलों से नीर बन के बूंद बूंद में फूल खिले।
चट्टानों को चीर के बहती सागर की तू गोद भरे, प्यास बुझाए हर तिनके की हम नमन तुझे 100 बार करें, हम नमन तुझे 100 बार करें।
गोदावरी हमारी माँ है। प्यारे बच्चों, गोदावरी को फिर एक बार अविरल और निर्मल बनाना है। गोदावरी की अविरलता और निर्मलता उसके शुद्ध सदा प्रवाह से बनेगी, और ये काम बच्चों से लेकर बड़ों तक सबको मिलके करना पड़ेगा। जब माँ बीमार होती है तो बच्चे भी बीमार होते हैं। हम अपने घर का सारा कूड़ा कचरा सब डालते हैं। ये बाढ़ और सुखाड़ और गोदावरी में बहता गंदा जल हमारे जीवन के लिए बड़ा संकट पैदा कर रहा है। इस विचार को समझ के अभी आज से ही इस काम के लिए जुटना होगा। लहू तू ही हो मेरा, माए तू ही भीतर मेरे, मैं हूँ एक रूप बस तेरा। तू बहे तू रहे एक बस ये लक्ष्य मेरा, तू बहे तू रहे एक बस ये लक्ष्य हो मेरा। गोदामा गोदामा
दिखाया है जिससे बनी तू ही तो वही माटी है, ना लेती है ना पाती है, बस देते देते जाती है।
ओ ये काया है जिससे बनी, तू ही तो वही माटी है, न लेती है ना पाती है, बस देते देते जाती है। निस्वार्थ तू है योद्धा तू, हमको विजय सिखाती है। तू बहे तू रहे एक बस ये लक्ष्य मेरा, तू बहे तू रहे एक बस ये लक्ष्य हो मेरा।
बसंती हो
तेरी ही रक्षा नित्य हो,
पवित्र तू बनी रहे,
यही हमारा लक्ष्य हो।
निर्मल भी तू बनी रहे सदा सदा।
तू बहे तू रहे एक बस ये लक्ष्य मेरा, तू बहे तू रहे एक बस ये लक्ष्य हो मेरा।
तो आइए हम सब मिलकर नदियों का सम्मान करें,
उनकी रक्षा करें।
So that was just the reminder, the fact that we call rivers our mother. I don't think it's unique to India, but perhaps more embedded in the Indian culture, that a river is typically seen as a goddess, as a mother, life-giving, and yet we are not able to manage our relationship with the mother. And I think that's where the whole concept of sacred ecology comes, that we need to reconnect ourselves with the sacredness by understanding fundamentally what that sacredness is based on. What is the foundation? And I'd like to close with this quote from Yaroslav Pelikan, where he says, "Tradition is the living faith of the dead. Traditionalism is the dead faith of the living." And I suppose I should add, it is the traditionalism that gives tradition such a bad name. What I take away from that is, while we talk about tradition, we tend to keep the outer peel, the top layer, the superfluous or the superficial layers. Just that's what we see and what we hold true. Whereas the fundamental understanding of what that tradition was based on goes missing, and it gets completely divorced from what the meaning of that tradition is. And that's where I think if we see ecology as part of our uh, very being, the human beings are part of the ecosystem, not standing above the ecosystem. Uh, the traditions, the faith, the myths, all of that start to make a lot more sense. It's not just old wives' tales or grandmother's stories. It is something which is real and impactful today to manage our relationship with the environment around us. So on that note, I would like to close and open the session for any question and answers. Do we have any questions? Nandini ji, could you manage? I think there are lots of questions. So if somebody can take that role. Yeah.
May I ask, sir?
Yes, please go ahead. Shashank. Yes.
Hello, sir. It's very nice to see that you mentioned about Anupam Mishra ji, because I left my job and I started venturing into ecology after reading his book only. Aaj Bhi Khare Hain Talab, and one more book is there, that is Sopan Joshi's Jal Thal Mal, which has a deep impact on me. It's in Hindi, so. But when I was studying in ecology and environment, I came across Mr. Dr. Brij Gopal's book River Ecology, and his talks, and that impacted me a lot. So when rivers are regulated for power projects in this country, like people think that the people living near the rivers are polluting them. Most of the time, that is not the case. It is actually the people who come and do the whole construction and try to regulate it, try to give it a straight line, try to convert it into a controlled thing. And because farmers, as far as I know, they like the flood water to come in their field so that the new silt comes in and make it more fertile. So in the government policymakers, do you know that why they do not involve ecologists? Why they only involve some civil engineers and so-called environment engineers, but not ecologists?
Yeah, I think, this is a question which will probably require us to delve into our history itself and how the nation came into being as far as India is concerned. When, 75, 76 years ago, we were drawing upon a base which was built through colonial rule over a period of 100-odd years. And the European society had gone in a direction which was industrial, and you see even now you see the kind of structure of the society and the economic management and the governance is drawn from that. While it's post-industrial, the whole thing of seeing a human being as at the top of the food chain of the ecosystem, and everything else being a resource for us to dip our hands into, and with very little thought given to what is the impact on the ecosystem, of our actions. What's the impact of our actions? I think that's something which started coming into play in Europe perhaps about 100 years ago. Okay, but by that time it was so well entrenched, and then when India became independent and a lot of other countries got their independence in the 1950s, 60s, in Africa, for instance, later, it was the European or let's say the the economic model and the social model was driven with that as the template. So the governance systems also, unfortunately, have followed that. So our large dams didn't get built only in the last few years. Large dams have been built in India since the 1950s. The engineers are not trained in ecology, have not been, and that's been the template. I believe that is changing now. I think we are a little bit more aware. I think, but as with anything, if you've got a super tanker, you need several kilometers to make it turn if you decide to make a turn. It's like that. Countries, nations, societies require time. A very important element of that is social pressure, societal pressure. So the community has to get involved. A lot of changes which have happened are driven from the community. And many of the changes actually are not built solely on economic arguments. They are built on social arguments, cultural arguments, religious arguments sometimes, right? That has a larger impact. So whether it is good practices, religion, faith, culture, social practices become a vehicle to kind of make it sustain over a longer period of time. Change can also happen through that. And I think that's something which we need to do more of. As individuals, as groups of people, I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
I think Mizanur is the second one to raise the hand, or is this Barbara?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. It was quite an insight. Really learned from your lecture. I read a book on national education policy. It's actually highlighted on the Bharatiya Gayana Parampara, meaning that those are types of the Ganges, which are in India, and they believe that a river like the Ganges is a river of knowledge, which flows continuously. So if I'm taking it in the perspective of education, the education in India should also be continuous. It should flow. There should be no hindrances or challenges that can be applied by the humans. So we need to avoid every challenge that is there, just like the bottles that were being spilled in the rivers. So in education also, we should also avoid such challenges so that we have quality education in India. Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the recommendations, you may have noticed, I didn't kind of mention it specifically, but one of the recommendations that was made during the C20 working group was that there should be introduction of water education in schools and colleges, age-appropriate water education, so that at a very early age, we're exposed to what's our relationship with water, the importance of water, and how to manage it. Both in terms of as a resource as well as respect it. So, the ecosystem, the ecology, all of that has to be introduced to the children at a very early age, because that's what sticks. If having fizzy drinks and kind of polluting the entire environment with plastic is the peak of human enablement and civilization, then we're in a very, very bad shape, right? So we have to reverse that. And the only way to reverse that is actually by training the generation now and future to, again, kind of, I would say, reconnect with nature's wisdom. And that wisdom has not gone. It exists in every society around the world, pretty much. I mean, we had during the C20 talks, we had a speaker from South Africa as well, and she spoke so passionately and so well about her, her travels around Africa, where the traditional societies actually have wisdom embedded in their practices. We just need to rediscover and propagate that again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I think Ms. Zanur is the next one to ask.
Sure.
Sir, thank you very much for your brilliant display. Your lecture and the video, especially the scenario and the music, touches my mind and so on. So also, I think our river will be safe and our riverian system based civilization will be prosper day and day, and our people will be very soon aware about the downstream and upstream located countries on this riverine system. All people will be benefited from our healthy riverine system. And thank you very much for your brilliant display, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Anur. Damasco, I think you have something to ask. Just a couple of people said, 2-3 people
Sure,
more.
sure. No issues.
Damasco.
Okay. Thank you very much, Doc, for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm concerned about the river Ganga. I want believes it is the most populated river in the world currently, since it's 2,800 kilometers long. My question is on the aquatic life, since most people that visit River Ganga, they are not only coming from India, but it's all over the world as they come to do their pilgrims. So as you said that in 2013, around 120 million came for the function, and 2025 we're expecting 400 million people to attend, and this trajectory is on the increase, and also the cumulative effect or impact of the pollutants and pollution that comes into River Ganga in particular, and all other rivers that we have for our rituals is on the increase. Are we going to have any solution on the aquatic life? 1, 2, in your own opinion, do you see these pilgrims going artificial? For example, use of these trenches to do these functions, so to speak, so that we maintain the ecological sustainability of these resources globally, but with the focus on the River Ganga. Thank you, Doug.
Sure. So I think there are a couple of parts to that question to be looked at. One is the sheer number of people. Every time that number of people increases in these kind of events. And that's something which I think I would not necessarily see it as a negative, because of course there is an impact. There is a pressure on the river when so many people come together and they're doing whatever they're doing there. That activity obviously has an impact, but it is for a limited amount of time. I think it is very important. I would see the engagement with the river of so many people positively, because that in turn creates a positive pressure for change. If you have more than 100 people, 200, 300 million people coming together for such an event, they are feeling connected with the river. The government structures or the governance structures will have to deploy all kinds of resources to make sure that the river is in a better shape than it was, say, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, right? And while a lot of money has been spent on the Ganga, I think we are starting to see the impact now, because our biggest impact actually is more long-term, which is our industrial effluents and the waste of domestic, and household waste, which goes into the rivers in a completely untreated manner. So we are polluting the river. That's the primary pollutant, the domestic effluents and the industrial effluents. There has to be a crackdown on that. And it's not something which will happen once in 12 years or once in 4 years. It has to happen every day. We are today, in some cases, the Yamuna is even more revered in some cases than the Ganga is. And I live in Delhi. The Yamuna is basically a drain. We've got all the sewage drains flowing to the Yamuna. The sewage treatment plants are not operating at full capacity. They're operating at some 25, 30%, 35%, I don't know. And clearly that's not enough. They are old, they're breaking down. New ones are being built, but we need to do more on that. We need to have a crackdown on the industries which are along the river, which are just letting out their industrial effluent in an untreated manner into that water. We think that we are washing away our sins, the river will carry them away. But the problem that we are creating for ourselves is very clearly visible. And I think that's something which, with all this action and activity, I think that's starting to have an impact now. We need to do this on a daily basis. One of the aspects that I would just like to mention is conservation of water. So in our domestic use, we have become accustomed to water flowing in our pipe, and we open a tap and water just flows down. How much water actually just goes down? So it is treated water which is coming into our home, and then that water it flows down into the drain. When we have a bath, how much of water are we using in our shower? Can we bring that down? Can we reduce the usage of water? Because once that happens, the impact in terms of pressure to pull water into the cities will also reduce. So I think all of these are, you've got to tackle all of these problems together. We can't just say we'll tackle one first and then leave the rest for later. We have to do all of this together. It's not just the government's job, it's everybody's job.
Thank you very much, Doc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Damasco. I think we should keep it really short. I find 4 more hands raising up, sir. Do you have time? I should ask that first.
It's okay. We can, let's go through it.
Yeah, please keep it short. Just Patson, you can ask your question.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to keep it short as possible. Of water quality, we appreciate that there are salt waters and saline waters, salt waters, freshwater sources. I don't know when they are worshipped, probably rivers and other sources of water, are they revered in the same manner? I would want to refer to the impact of water quality, especially to agricultural productivity. I'll give an example of what saline water does to the soils. It actually adds to salticity, it adds to salinity, it compromises the soil pH. That's what salt water does. But then when we have our worship lines giving some reference to water sources, are they worshipped or respected or revered in the same manner? Thank you.
So I'll just answer it in 2 points which are kind of related, but they're 2 separate activities I want to talk about. One is the fact that, remember what I said about the ecosystem and the water cycle. I think we have to keep that in mind. Salt water. So if you look at the world, fresh water is a very small fraction of the total water, while 70+% of the Earth's surface is covered with water. It's mostly salt water, it's sea, it's oceans. And that's not usable. Within fresh water also, a very, very tiny fraction is actually accessible to us, which becomes useful to us. Now, even that we are polluting. What we are doing, for instance, I'll just take an example. If we are damming up a river and we are creating a massive dam, we are slowing down the flow of the water. We are stopping the flow of silt in the river in one place behind the dam. That silt actually would have been carried down almost along the path of the river to the sea. It would have formed a delta. When that silt is not being carried, the sea starts to come inland, and where there was a fertile delta with very, very fertile soil and silt, which could be used by farmers, now it has saline water, and that impacts, right? So it's not unrelated, it is related. We have to tackle one to tackle the other. When we are extracting fresh water from underground resources, we are emptying them out. We are, if you look at some of the biggest seas, the Aral Sea, for instance, we've extracted water from that, and it is a small body of water. It's going to be more and more brackish. the salt content will go up because the amount of water available is going down. So all of these are problems which are a problem of overexploitation, of abuse, of pollution. There is the other aspect which I want to mention was an initiative which is a very laudable initiative by an NGO called Sagar Mitra, which is basically saying, let's stop plastic pollution at the source, because when plastic flows down the river, through our drains and down the river, it goes to the sea, and it has an impact on aquatic life. Most of the oxygen that gets generated for us and every other living being which uses oxygen in the world actually is generated by the sea rather than by the trees that we see on the ground. When you cover the sea animal, the plankton, the phytoplankton, etc., with plastic, they can't process sunlight and they can't do photosynthesis as effectively, and they can't produce oxygen as effectively. So it's the whole system is linked, and we have to tackle this. So to answer your first question, which you asked, are sea waters revered as well? There is, in Indian mythology, you have Varun, who's the god of the sea, god of the waters, really. And then you have the different rivers in their different forms. But even in Aztec culture, you have the goddess who is the goddess of freshwater rivers, who's the goddess of the ocean, and who's the goddess of childbirth as well. So it's not unique to India. I think everywhere water in all its forms is revered, as long as we can hold it in reverence and manage it and manage our relationship, we are okay. Otherwise, I think we're headed down a very bad path. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Answer.
I think last one question with Mandida. You're not audible, Mandida. Please unmute.
Okay, you spoke about policies that are there in place, the various policies which are there in place. I wanted to ask, in terms of gender equality, what is it that is being done to make sure that women are represented in these policies, in key decision-making positions? Because women are the most affected with water. 70% of women are the ones who use water. So what is it that is being done to make sure that women are also involved in water committees as chairpersons, but not as administrative clerks?
Okay, so I can't answer for the governments who are doing whatever they're doing. I can only speak from whatever exposure I've had to the activity. The two areas that I talked about, the C20 policy document and the project that I mentioned, the Aviral Godavari project. When we talk about community and community involvement, when we talk about bottom-up policy making and management, women are the integral part of that, because women are what hold society together, actually. The men tend to migrate. If things are not going well in one place, men will go and get a job somewhere else in some other city or whatever. Women are the ones who are actually managing the family and managing the resources, and the worst affected by the lack of water or restricted water quality or whatever. So, and their health is actually sometimes in the family, their health is the worst because of these reasons. So when we are talking about community activities, for instance, it is generating livelihood, generating involvement of the women in those communities so that they can become like the guardians of this whole eco infrastructure which is being managed and maintained and created. Because without their involvement, and for that they need to have due importance. You can't just say that, okay, we will involve, we will impact women without involving them. That doesn't happen, right? So I think that's part of the whole bottom-up approach that I mentioned earlier, where the success of, we saw Dr. Rajendra Singh in the film, and earlier in some of the pictures as well, he's involved with the Aviral Godavari project. He's helped to revive 14, 15 rivers across the country in India. the ladies in those communities where the river has got revived are integral to the success of that project. If the women were not involved, I don't think the projects would have been as successful and sustained. I think it's one thing to get success at one point, but to sustain it, you need to embed the practices in the society. And how do the practices get transferred to the next generation? It's through the mothers. It's through the ladies. The tradition is carried through the women. And I think that's totally kind of the bedrock, the foundation on which success would be built in this area.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's all the questions. I don't think nobody is there. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for the wonderful session. I hope all of them have enjoyed the sessions too. I'll ask them to provide their feedback as soon as possible, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for listening to me patiently. And I hope I was able to add something to your work as well. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.